Good afternoon, everyone from New York City, still under partial lockdown, but very eager to pass to the second phase of the reopening and to the new reality, whatever that may mean. But hopefully more relaxation and more going out. Thank you for watching a new episode of our Leon Ferraru conferences, one of our 6 permanent programs that form our online overall program, one that is dealing with transatlantic affairs, giving a voice to experts in Romanian-American relations from both sides of the Atlantic. We are very happy to welcome to this edition one of the brightest minds in international development, international economic cooperation, banking, finance, Dr. Charles Frank. Dr. Frank, thank you for accepting our invitation and welcome to the program.
Well, thank you for sending me the invitation. I appreciate it.
Charles Frank graduated from Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, took his PhD in economics from Princeton University, where was one of the youngest tenured professors in the history of the university. In fact, there is a slight debate whether he was the youngest or the second youngest tenured professor. But he taught economics and international affairs. He also taught at Yale University and on Makerere University in Uganda. He had a long and very fruitful career. He was acting president of the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, a deputy assistant secretary of state for economic and social affairs, and chief economist on the policy planning staff of the US Department of State. He was a senior fellow of the Brookings Institution, the influential Washington-based think tank. He was also director of the Central European Media Enterprises, vice president of Salomon Brothers and GE Capital. He is the owner of Time Out Bucharest and is currently a board member of influential NGO Alianța, an NGO working to strengthen Romanian-American relations, and our partner in organizing today's edition of the Leon Ferraru conferences. Dr. Frank, welcome again. I will start with a topic related to Romania. This is a country that you know well from a professional standpoint, but also from a personal one, not least being married to the extraordinary Eleanor Sebastian Frank, who was born in Romania and has kept a very close relationship to Romania. But in 1981, you weren't prepared to take a trip to Romania to visit Eleanor's relatives, but also but to meet with no other than Nicolae Ceausescu, the dictator of socialist Romania. Tell us about the circumstances of this faithful meeting.
Well, in 1981, I was working for Salomon Brothers, which at the time was one of the most prestigious investment banks on Wall Street. And in the summer of 1981, a company called Philip Brothers purchased Salomon Brothers. And Philip Brothers had significant ties to Romania. It had an office in Bucharest and was in the commodity trading business and did a lot of commodity trading transactions with Romania. And the chairman of Philip Brothers, his name was Milton Rosenthal, was very active in helping Romania get what is called most favored nation treatment by the United States, which means that the United States would open up its economy to Romanian exports on tariff terms that were as good as any other country could get. So it was really important for Romania to get this MFN because it helped the Romanian economy and it helped Romanian trade. Well, Mr. Rosenthal came to John Goodfriend, who was then the president of Salomon Brothers, and said, look, Romania has a problem. They have a significant amount of debt, $11 billion, which at the time was really something. And they need help in rescheduling it because they can't pay it off, or they have difficulty at least in paying it off. So I know the president of the country, Mr. Ceausescu, and I can schedule a meeting with him where we can make a pitch to serve as advisor to Romania to reschedule their debt. So John Goodfriend came to me and said, look, will you get in touch with Mr. Rosenthal and work out something with him? Which I did. And he said, look, I've scheduled a meeting for, he had a certain date. I can't remember exactly at the time what it was. And he said, but I'm going to bring my wife along. Would you like to bring your wife along? I said, do you realize my wife is Romanian and she may not be welcome? So we checked with the Romanian consulate here in New York and they said she's fine, not to worry. Of course, so we then arrived in Romania, and of course, Eleanor, who spoke perfect Romanian, had a translator, which was obviously a government official in the Securitate. So, and we were wined and dined, and then we had a meeting the next day with Ceausescu, and it lasted 4 hours. And Mr. Rosenthal and I hardly got in a word. Ceausescu talked like 3 hours and 50 minutes of those four hours, and mainly bragging about what Romania had done for the United States in opposing Russian expansionism, in promoting nuclear demilitarization. It was very clear to me that this was a political game here. He was not really interested in rescheduling the debt. He just wanted to score some political points with the US, with Mr. Rosenthal. And he knew that Mr. Rosenthal had friends in high places. So but by welcoming him there, he would help in his relationships politically with the United States.
So instead of a negotiation and a discussion based on
Facts.
economic right and economic reason, it was in fact a political conversation, a sort of diplomatic exchange in the end, right?
Exactly. We tried to follow it up with a few proposals to assist them on financing certain things, but it never went anywhere. So was a waste of time, but it was, for me, really something special, and I really enjoyed it. But it also became clear to me that Romania was in deep, deep trouble because the buildings we were in, the meetings we were in would be cold because they'd turn off the heating. They'd be dark because nobody wanted to have too many lights on. And the food would be, you go to a restaurant and you'd be lucky to get one dish. I mean, it was just, and you go to a shop and there was no food. You might see a few salamis hanging from the ceiling, but nothing else in a butcher shop.
This is not Nicolae Ceausescu's knocking at the door, I suppose, but somebody's working beneath your apartment, right?
That's right. Now you're hearing it.
You can hear it, but no, it's not annoying at all. No, go ahead. Sorry for this interruption.
Well, anyway, so that's it. So
but
nothing.
It was a country that was at the beginning of a very dark, cold, and complicated decade in its history. Did you, when it was your first visit to Romania, could you compare it to something you had seen before, or it was the first impression?
No, I'd never seen anything like that. I mean, it's, and it only got worse, as you know, because
that's right.
The government squeezed the economy to export, and they paid off half their debt by 1985 and all of it by 1989. So he got rid of the debt, but then the Romanians got rid of Ceausescu.
Yeah, and during that time of a lot of things. So you have looking back, you have the feeling that the decision had already been taken somehow to not to try to restructure the debt, to reschedule it, but to go on a different path, like paying all the debts and relying on exports and all the elements of economic policy.
But not on the terms that he thought he could get. I mean, he thought he wasn't realistic about what economic terms he could get, and he wasn't realistic about the political concessions that he needed to make. In order to get the international community behind him, he had to allow immigration, particularly of the Jews, but all other minorities, and allow free travel. And so the US put a lot of pressure on him to improve his human rights performance. And in that environment, he wasn't willing to make the concessions he needed to make in order to get the economic help he would have liked to have had.
But for almost 4 hours, he spoke about foreign policy, about Romanian foreign policy, and how helpful Romania was to the United States on various dossiers. Did he want to trade this political attitudes for economic concessions, because he asked for a very, very favorable term for borrowing even more money, but on a different rate.
Well, he just wasn't realistic. He didn't realize what he had to do. He didn't want to do what he had to do in order to get the economic help. So he squeezed the Romanian people.
As you remember him, do you remember him as somebody that was out of touch with reality, or on the contrary, somebody very shrewd, as many portray?
That's hard to say. If he were shrewd, he could have gotten he would have made enough political concessions to achieve his economic goals. No, he didn't really want to have to pay off the debt, but he wanted to do it because he wasn't willing to pay the price.
when you left the meeting and in your plane back to the United States, did you have the feeling that Romania was at an inflection point, that was something different was about to begin in terms of the economic realities, that change was in the air, a new policy was about to be reenacted? Did you have this?
Well, I certainly wasn't very hopeful. I mean, I saw the poor conditions under which people lived, and I saw no particular reason why that would improve. So it looked to me like it was just going to get worse, and it did.
And also because of the fact that they were not realistic about how to deal with this mounting debt,
Yeah,
that crushing the Romanian economy.
correct.
Because I'm asking because some historians, some political scientists locate the beginning of the end on this really mad policy of devoting everything to experts and relying on experts and emphasizing experts more than anything else, and making your own people go hungry, and all these shortages and cold and dark. And that's why I've always found fascinating this story, because I must admit I learned about it for quite some time. Your meeting with Nicolae Ceausescu, because I find it that it's sometime the beginning of the end, and you were just there. Of course, as a participant in history, sometimes you can't realize that you are in fact facing an historical moment, or living a historical moment. But it's something that after that, it was the relationship with the United States wasn't that good anymore, even though it had been very good in the late 60s, during the 70s. So everything changed after that, right?
Yes, I mean, the most favored nation treatment was gained by Romania in the mid-70s. But in 1988, Ceausescu actually renounced the most favored nation treaty and decided he didn't need that help. That was an incredibly stupid decision, but he was just angry with the pressure being put on him on human rights issues and on democratic government issues. So he was not rational, particularly near the end, and so it's not surprising he was he was overthrown.
Thankfully, we have now a completely different situation with our strategic partnership with the US, of course, very close ties on many levels. So it's definitely a thing of a long and long past, long back in the past. But let's get now to the present. Of course, we are passing through a very difficult time with the global medical crisis, global pandemic that has triggered a lot of social, economic, political consequences. People are talking about a crisis of huge economic crisis of huge proportions, one that we haven't seen since probably the Great Depression of the early 30s. How bad it is? What do you think?
Well, it's all relative. I mean, in fact, the World Bank projects that the world economy will decline by 5% in 2020 over 2019. And the World Trade Organization projects that international trade will decline at best by 13% and at worst by 32%. So there's going to be a huge impact. However, and it's worse than the 2008-9 Great Recession.
Credit crunch of 2008.
For example, unemployment in the US today is around 15%. At its worst in 2009-10, it was 10%. And the decline in GDP is about twice this time around than it was in the Great Recession. But the Great Depression was far worse. The decline in output was 30%. Unemployment rate was 25% at various times. So this economic shock is somewhere between the Great Depression and the 2008-9 Great Recession. But still, it's bad, and there are going to be a lot of people out of work, and it's very sad.
But do you see, because people are talking about a U-shaped recovery or a V-shaped recovery, meaning that it's a U-shape, it's a slow recovery, it's a painful recovery, while the V-shape, as soon as we find a vaccine or something happens, then the economy takes off again, and everything is back in normal. How do you see it? What's your sense about it?
Well, I think it's likely to be a combination of V and U. By that I mean, it looks like there may be a bounce back in 2021 from the decline in 2020. For example, in the case of Romania, the IMF is projecting a decline of 5% in 2020, but an increase in GDP of 3.9% in 2021. So that looks a little bit like a V, but it's going to take a long time to really get back to where we were. So you have maybe a blip as the reopening of the economy takes place, but it takes a long time for us to get back to where we were before the COVID crisis hit us. And projecting what's going to happen is pretty difficult because there are so many uncertainties. For example, we don't know how strong will be the economic stimulus reaction to the crisis. We don't know how quickly the reopening will take place. We don't know how quickly the virus will be able to be conquered. The longer it takes, the longer it's going to take for recovery. And we don't know whether people will resume their prior habits in terms of going to theater, entertainment, restaurants and bars and so on. People may stay away from them even if the economy is fully opened. They may just not go and prefer to stay at home and not take the risk. So all of these things combine to raise the possibility that it's going to take a very long time to fully recover, although there may be an immediate positive.
In any crisis, there are, of course, a lot of losers, a lot of industries. Of course, people are losing a lot, but there are winners as well. Do you see any winners in this process of recovery? because I will tell you who are one of the major losers, and that's the cultural sector. But I'll get back to that a little later. But are there any losers in this troubled time, in this economic turmoil?
Well, you asked first whether there are any winners. It's, I think, rather hard to find winners. We do know that Zoom is probably a winner.
Of course, technology.
Technology, some certain types of technology, and of course that Amazon is a big winner.
Right.
But it's hard to find many other that you can. The losers will be wide all over the place. I mean, you can have airlines, cruise lines, the arts, especially theater and the opera, the arts in general are in deep trouble.
That's right.
Airplane manufacturing rather.
Hospitality.
Bars, restaurants. I mean, nearly everybody is going to be hit by this. With very few exceptions.
Yes, we look with a lot of apprehension to what lies ahead, especially because, of course, we are working in the arts, and the arts sector is very, very hard hit by not only by the pandemic, but by the emerging economic crisis. We are here in New York, as you know so well, because you and Eleanor are arts lovers, and go and see all sorts of cultural programming. Arts is meant to reopen, or art venues and cultural venues, in the fourth phase. So we still have to quite some time until things will get back to normal. But talking about the arts, when do you think you will be able to see opera performance or a concert again in New York?
Well, we'll be able to see them, but it depends on how the arts centers are reopened. I mean, most likely, at least initially, there will be social distancing,
Right.
which will mean that you won't be able to fill the auditorium. So you'll lose maybe half or 2/3 of the revenues that you might otherwise expect. So it's going to take and also you have a problem of people's attitude. I'm not going to go off to an opera tomorrow because, what's the point? I mean, why take the risk?
That's right.
And am I going to stay shy and remain fearful even after everything is fully reopened? I don't know, but it doesn't bode well. I mean, even today, I'm surprised. I go to the Metropolitan Opera and still I see a lot of empty seats. I mean, even before the crisis occurred, they're having their problems at keeping the auditorium filled. It's just going to get worse.
Yes, you are not picturing a very optimistic image of the cultural sector. I would add that some probably will never be able to recover, and some of the smaller venues and smaller companies might not be able to survive this this time without the public, because they've always been on the brink of bankruptcy. They've always had problems. So it's really a tough time. It's a tough time for artists, for technicians who are not able to make an income during this time, even though they can benefit from the government's support to a certain extent. But yeah, we talk about, so you see a rather sluggish recovery, a V that it's more like a U in many respects.
Maybe a partial V,
yeah,
and then a U.
And then so it still needs some time until we get back to hopefully
Normal.
to normal, or the reality before the pandemic. How do you see that this situation may affect the transatlantic relations? First with Europe as a whole, and then we'll talk about the Romanian American economic relations.
Well, as I said earlier, international trade will decline precipitously. More than GDP will decline, more than gross domestic product or output will decline. But I don't see any. I'm not really worried about the crisis provoking animosity between the United States and Europe. If anything, I think that it may even provide an environment to strengthen economic ties. No, I don't see a big impact on international relations. I do see a big impact on trade. I see a big impact on global supply chains. Mm-hmm. Which will, I think what this crisis has shown us is that if you have a complicated and widely dispersed supply chain, you can get hit by a failure in any one link. And therefore, the more you're diversified in your supplies, the better off you are. And the more you rely on any one group of suppliers in different countries, you may have a problem. So I think there will be less trade associated. It's a longer run effect. The immediate effect will be just because of a collapse of demand, the whole trade economy will collapse. But there will be a longer term effect, which could keep trade from growing longer term as much as it might otherwise do.
Do you see a rise in economic nationalism, in the temptation to invest more in your country rather than also to repatriate some of the industries and economy, or shelter yourself behind tariffs? Do you see anything like that?
Well, we already have in the United States that's led by a president that is determined to disrupt trade relations, and with the intent of trying to get more favorable treatment. But I don't know that it will, in and of itself, lead to more nationalism. I mean, we're already there. With President Trump, with Xi from Beijing, and there will be pressures to get protective health equipment from your own country rather than rely on someone else. But that's not going to be a major disruption to trade.
And what about the American investment in Romania, the economic relations with Romania? Do you think will it be affected?
Well, first of all, there's very little economic foreign investment that comes from America. The only significant one is the Ford Foundation investments in automobile and engine manufacturer in Craiova, and that will go on probably regardless of the crisis. So it isn't a question of America reducing its foreign investment. Romania gets most of its foreign investment from the EU countries. And that will be affected because I think just in general, people are going to be more cautious. They're going to be more risk averse. And so there will be a decline. In fact, this foreign direct investment in Romania had been growing very rapidly since the 2008-9 recession. Had been growing rapidly. In 2019, it reached 5.3 billion euro, which is very substantial and important to the Romanian economy. But in the first 3 months of this year, it looks like there's been a net outflow of investment. Yeah, there's going to be a significant negative impact on foreign direct investment, just as there is on trade.
But and how do you see the major vulnerabilities of Romania during this time in economic terms, of course?
Well, Romania was on a roll, to be honest, from 2008-9 until 2019. It grew at a very substantial rate.
Yeah. One of the biggest in Europe.
It was first, second among all European countries.
That's right.
In terms of economic growth. And it did it without being fiscally irresponsible. The government budget was less than 3% of GDP for every year since, I think, 2011 until 2019, when it went over 3%, it went to 4.6%. So it's going to have a hard time getting back to that good path that it was on. You add to that some of the political turmoil that Romania is undergoing. The real vulnerability is, I guess, that they can't get back to their good growth path and their fiscal responsibility.
So it's something that may have the political situation you believe may affect the economics, and also what's happening in the European Union. That's the most important indicator, right?
Well, politics are important because they affect people's perception of risk. The more political turmoil there is, the more risky investors think it is. So a good solid political situation in Romania would go a long way to helping in the economic recovery. But I'm not a political scientist, and I don't know what's going to happen. The other thing that I worry about is this is not just Romania, but it's all countries. How are we going to find the right rate at which to reopen the economies? I mean, the governments are all over the place. I'm concerned that there will be too many miscalculations and that we won't open. I'm concerned, quite frankly, that we won't open fast enough. Because I think originally the reason for lockdowns was because everybody was afraid that the health system would be overwhelmed.
That's right.
There's too many cases and not enough health resources to.
That's right. Yeah.
To cure the people who do get sick and to care for them. So, and that's why we flattened the curve, or why we tried to flatten the curve, or why the world tried to flatten the curve. But the curve has largely been flattened. In most countries and in most places, the fear of the hospitals running out of beds and running out of ventilators has more or less disappeared. So therefore, I'm beginning to worry about the effect of the lockdowns or failure to reopen in terms of increasing the deaths and illness from other diseases. For example, in Monday's New York Times, there was a long article that told about the rate of vaccination has declined. People are staying at home and not going to get vaccinations, and that's going to mean more and more people are going to get the measles, or going to get other diseases that are not COVID and have been able to be controlled, which may not be able to be controlled in the future because of the economic downturn. There was another article in the New York Times today about poorer people who can't afford to pay for healthcare, or whose insurance is going to be lost because they've lost their jobs. So that's going to have a health effect. That's going to cost lives. So we have to balance the economic misery caused by keeping an economy tightly closed and the increase in coronavirus infections if we open it too quickly. I would rather err on being open
sooner.
Yeah. So that's a big concern that I have.
Yeah, it's I should say one of the most difficult trade-off, one of the most difficult decision a politician must take during these days, to keep the trade-off between fast economic recovery, opening fast, putting everything in place, and the restarting the engine of the economy and all the rest, and also be careful that a very abrupt opening may lead to the increase of the contagion of the cases, and we see that in the United States. In some of the states, the cases are going up, and also we see to a certain extent in Romania. Of course, we don't see that the hospitals are overwhelmed yet, but it may happen. So it's indeed, as you say, a very difficult situation. But as an economist, do you think that can we postpone this massive reopening in economic terms? Are the governments, the banks able to sustain financially this time when the economy is brought
well, the longer it takes to reopen, the longer it's going to take to recover, because what's going to happen is that if you continue to be more or less locked down, or at least highly restricted in economic activity that can go on, the balance sheets of companies and households become overloaded with debt, because they can't.
Yeah.
The only way you can survive is to go more into debt. So that's going to weigh heavily on the economy for a very long time to come, if the debt increases too rapidly. Now, the good news is that our banks are in much better shape than they were, say, in 2007-8. That's the good news, but it can get bad pretty quickly. So, and if households are running up debt and can't afford to buy automobiles or appliances or whatever, and it's going to take a long time for the balance sheets of the economic actors to reach a better equilibrium. So I worry that by not opening, and there are ways to mitigate the potential effects from opening. I mean, you can still stay home. I mean, individuals have that choice. They don't have to go to movies or to operas. If individuals want to save or protect them, they have the means to do it. And it's the rich individuals who have better means to do it. Poor people don't have the means to help themselves. So they need jobs, and they need income. So I think, it's a tough. I'd hate to be the governor of New York or the mayor of New York or mayor of any, even in Podunk, even my hometown Bellevue, because it's such a difficult set of decisions to make.
Yes, yes, indeed. It's a very, very tough time, and also, of course, the people are suffering. People in culture and arts, as we said, are suffering, but also small businesses that are very hard hit by by this situation, and they provide a lot of jobs and a lot of the energy of the economy. But there is an organization that hasn't stopped and can't be stopped by the pandemic or the crisis, and the name of that organization is Alianza. And in Alianza, there are, I think, all the former US ambassadors to Romania are members. Also, people in the economic sector and in other sectors that have dealt to Romania and know Romania well. It's indeed an amazing organization. We're very happy to partner with Alianza in several projects. But tell us a little bit more about this organization, because probably some people don't know much about it.
Yeah, well, the organization was initially founded mainly by Mark Gittenstein, who was the US ambassador to Romania. I'm trying to remember when, well, in early 10 years or so ago.
That's right.
And the other co-founder was Jim Rosapek, also a former ambassador to Romania. But not all former ambassadors are involved in Alianza.
I thought everybody's involved in Alianza. Even Romanian Cultural Institute in New York is involved in Alianza.
Yeah, but anyway, it's a very good organization. It's been running for about 5-6 years. It holds an annual gala, usually in the fall. And unfortunately, this fall it will be either canceled or postponed. But it is an organization that's devoted to furthering interchange and communication between Romanians and Americans in different fields, improving the relationship, improving the cross-cultural fertilization in cultural affairs, which is why we're very pleased to be working with you fellows, the Romanian Cultural Institute. It also, I think, has a useful value in bringing people together in the economics field, particularly in technology industries, where Romania is a leader both in Romania and in Romanian born people are very important in Silicon Valley.
That's right.
And so there's a lot of cross fertilization there on the technology side and on national security. I think we both have a common interest in preserving Romania's democratic institutions, in preserving stability in a region that can sometimes be a little bit frightening in terms of government behavior. So
strengthening the strategic partnership as well, which is
and of course Romania is a very important strategic partner to the United States. So it's an organization that focuses on communication, exchange, and cross-fertilization in these fields.
how can people join in the efforts of Alianza? A lot of leaders of the Romanian American community are members of Alianza. At the gala in Washington, you can see a lot of the who's who in the Romanian American community. Also in in this growing group of Americans who know Romania so well. How can other people be involved in the programs, in the efforts, in the advocacy effort of Alianza?
Well, first of all, you can visit the website and see what's happening, and you can write and ask to join or to be put on their list, get an invitation to the gala when and if it happens, and just and also ICR, I think, is now an important door for us to go through to learn more about Alianza. I mean, your relationship with them is relatively new, but I think very promising, and I hope it works out for both ICR and Alianza.
It's already borne fruits, and I think it's going to develop. It's unfortunate that we are not able to work together at the gala this year, but there will be other instances where we can develop our partnerships. We will, of course, continue to work with Alianza and other organizations, Romanian American or American organizations that want to strengthen the Romanian American relations and partnership. For us is very important. It was one of the perennial objectives. Before we end our conversation, it's already 1 hour since we started. I'd like to remind our viewers to visit our website rciusa.info, or get in touch on social media. We are doing a lot of things these days. Our online program is made of several permanent series in Romanian history, literature, conversations like this, music, visual arts, cultural history. And we are producing a lot of original and exclusive content. And you can learn more about Romania, about our culture, by following this series. So far, we have received a lot of praise, I should say, a very good response from our public that is growing day by day. So we are very, very proud of that. I'm very thankful to all those who are watching our programs and write to us in such a nice terms. Dr. Charles Frank, thank you for sharing with this afternoon with us. It's been a very interesting, interesting conversation. I truly hope you are wrong 80% of what you predicted, and the recovery will be steep, and we will come back to the life we enjoyed before. But joke aside, I'm sure that it's going to be a tough road ahead, and we have to be well prepared.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate your efforts to improve the relationship between our two organizations, Alianza and ICR, and I look forward to working with you in the future. And also, you're right, very close to us. We can always go down to the Cultural Institute, to the consulate, and see you there. And we'll do that more and more as we as we get over this coronavirus crisis?
Charles, we are longing for our public. We are longing to go back to the physical stages, but we have to wait until the phase 4 of the reopening to see what's
Phase 4. Right.
Phase 4, yeah, that's apparently for these cultural venues, it's phase 4, and it's a lot of restrictions. So we are starting to plan for that moment. We are eagerly anticipating that moment, but let's wait and see. But definitely, we long for our public. We long for our time when you and others came to our events here in New York or throughout the United States, because it's not an institute for New York, it's an institute for the entire United States and also Canada. Before we go, I'd like to thank all our viewers. I thank you for your kind words. I thank you for watching our programs. I'd like to remind everybody that all our program is dedicated to medical personnel, to the essential workers, especially Romanian American and Romanian Canadian, who are doing a fantastic job and have done a fantastic job to keep us safe. So see you at the other programs at the Romanian Cultural Institute in New York. Thank you for watching. Stay safe and keep close. Thank you.
Thank you.